Come on, pal. Come on. Oh no. Welcome back. Some of you may have seen we've already put E30 M3 calipers on the front, but now we've got to work out how to get the calipers onto the rear using a rotor that hopefully we don't have to mess around with too much. So we've got the caliper. These are all pretty much the same from 140i, 240i, M4, M3. They're all the same rear caliper. The rear rotors do vary a little bit. The rotor I have here is a 345mm rotor, which for my car is going to be huge. So you need to consider what you need for your car. I should also mention this is a E36 compact trailing arm. But first things first, we've got to get the rotor bolted up to the trailing arm, work out heights and the handbrake shoes to make it so we've still got a handbrake. Rotor, bolts, straight on. Because it's the BMW, the studs are in the same spot and the retaining screw is the same. Even though this is off a much newer car, this rotor, I believe, is the M140i rotor. I'll take you off the tripod and show you the first issue with this rotor onto this trailing arm. We're in luck in some regards because the drum diameter for an E30 is 160mm. This rotor is exactly the same. It's only out by 12mm. It's hard to see, but from here to that face is 12mm. So this would work, but you'd be losing about half to maybe a third of the handbraking width on the E30. So you can see the drum radius and then the thickness of the shoes. So we're losing about 12mm. Luckily, these shoes sit on this dust shield. So if we can push this dust shield out 12mm, that will push the shoes in 12mm. We'll have the full face clamping just here. So I went to solid with all of these problems, and I was thinking I might need to do something weird with the shoes. I'd have to do something completely different, find a rotor with a different hat height, so then it sits over the shoes. Cam, because he's a genius, just said, well, how about we make some spaces that sit behind and then just push this whole dust shield out. So we're going to install these. I did have the good idea of breaking them into two halves. So if you're going to retrofit this, you don't need to remove your hub or your bearing. You undo all of the handbrake functionality, undo the bolts to loosen the dust shield off, and you can just slide these in either side instead of having to take everything apart to get these in. That's what I'm going to do next. We'll get these installed, so then we can work out the bracket to hold the calipers. So if you're doing this on a car, yes, it's going to be annoying to undo the handbrake, but it would be even more annoying if you have to do the wheel bearing as well. 10mm socket for the top ones, 14mm for the handbrake plate bolts, and now we can just slide this forward. And we can slide one in, and the other one in. And then get our slightly longer bolts. Swap out the handbrake bracket bolts. Nip everything up. So you can see we have just stepped out 12mm. I've looked at the handbrake lines and there should be enough movement, but this is something that I'm going to confirm when I install this into my car. Now we just want to get the shoes back on. The little cutout goes to the bottom where the cable is. The big one will go to the adjuster. When you're getting these shoes on, you want to make sure that both of these flats are against this bracket. All right, so we've got that in. Now we just need to get both the springs attached. That is now back together as a handbrake. That was horrible. I did not enjoy that, but it still beats taking the hub out. Sick. Okay, so now what we can do, I should have done this before I put it all back together. We need to cut this lip off of the dust shield. Now that we've cut the dust shield off, brake rotor should fit on. That looks absolutely spot on. Yes, sick. Okay, before you skip ahead, give me a second of your time. We're doing this whole brake upgrade so I can put those brakes on my E30 M3 Ute. If you're new to the channel, maybe check out the rest of the build. It's pretty sick. I want to take a second to just say, can you please hit that like button? As a smaller creator, the likes are a huge portion on how likely my video is to go viral or to be sent out to the rest of the world. And to push this out to as many people as I can, I need everyone who's watching to just hit the like button. I know it's something that's said so often and just completely ignored or disregarded, but as a smaller content creator, it makes a huge difference to how many people this video gets pushed out to. And I really want to show it to as many people as I can, so please, 2 seconds, bang, done, sick. All right, now let's get these brakes onto the trailing arm so then we can get it into the car. Sick. So now we've got to design the bracket for the caliper onto the rotor. Come on, pal. Come on. There we go. So, we want to make sure that the brake pad is sitting properly on the annulus of the rotor. Now the annulus is the face of the rotor, where the pad sits. We don't have a huge amount of room. If we get it sitting right, the shape of the caliper doesn't allow for a lot of room for this stud. So what we're going to have to do, the shape of the caliper, there's a kind of angle down here and it doesn't allow a lot of room for a thread going through. So we can't have a bolt going down, we've got to have a stud coming up. We want a cardboard template. We've got to get these 2 holes and these 2 holes on a piece of cardboard, get studs up, and I'm probably just going to do this out of a bit of 3mm plate and then washers so then I can get the height right. Done. Sick. We've got our pizza shapes. This one's for you, Fat Pooter. Went out and bought some pizza shapes and ate them just so I could make my next template out of a box. Rough template sits in there, cut it out of 3mm sheet steel, put some thread in there, weld it on, and then washers down to keep the caliper in the right spot, and then we've got a bracket. So pretty nifty. Take it over to the sander and clean it all up. I've had to grind out the back just to get that clearance on the back side of the caliper. We now need to just measure how long a bit of all thread. We can now put that in there and that in there and weld them from the back side. Just gonna go cool that off before I take my gloves off. And now we can see if that all bolts together. So, whew, that is tight. Sick. Let's just get some bolts in and see if that fits first. And we also need to get the spacing right. So I'm gonna need some washers. I've found a bunch more washers. I've got 5 aside, which is about 12.3mm, which we've got to consider the likelihood of being able to get the exact thickness plate cut out. I know 12mm plate is a standard, but we're up to like 14mm thick. So I don't know how easy it's going to be to get this laser cut at this stage. So I think we make it work and then just kind of hope that things work out from there. We actually have a lot more clearance than I thought going from the caliper in the corner here to the trailing arm. I'll stand it up and I'll do it without cutting myself on the dang dust shield. But the other thing to consider is you want to try and get this seam down the middle of the rotor, and we're pretty spot on there really. There is a little bit of movement just because it's only a 3mm plate right now. There is a little bit of movement, but that looks really good. And we've got way more clearance on the back side than I thought. Yeah, that's spot on. Ah, the annulus. Are we sitting in the right spot? It's hard to tell. Yeah, we are. Yeah, that's sick. And you can tell also because the brake pads are sitting in the right spot up the top here as well. Yes! I need to now get all of this down to Eden so he can draw it up. We can 3D print it, confirm that it's right, maybe clean up some of the bracket, just make it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. And then we've got rear brakes. We have the plate. Eden then copied all of the dimensions we needed to into his 3D designing program, just to make sure that all of the holes lined up, looked good, had the dimensions right. And this was very thin. It's really light, not a lot of infill. He then did one with more infill, so it's got a little bit more strength, and also added these little hex points for the captured nuts. So before we can bolt this on, we need to grind the clearance on the back of here so that that bolts onto there. This taper just here needs to have clearance on the bracket, and we're gonna see how much we need to grind off of this before we can get it bolted onto the caliper. Then we can decide whether or not there's enough meat in there to add threads to, or we need to press studs in from the other side. I'm gonna get my little finger sander, start tickling this down, get it to the point where it can bolt onto the caliper, and then we can press our nuts in on both of the points on the back, and then we're gonna need to clean the nut up just so it's got that same clearance. We've got the clearance. It'll be interesting to put the nut in, get it down so it's still flat with the clearance that I've just added in, and measure the thickness of the shorter point for how much thread we've got, because that'll be the determining factor for whether or not we need to put a stud through, or we can just drill and tap the bracket itself. With the clearance that we've got, we definitely have enough like meat to put a stud through, so we can continue going down and just answer questions as we go. I've just put the bolt that goes into the caliper in, and I just need a little bit more clearance, so I'm gonna chuck a 12.5mm drill down here, and then we can bolt it all together. That's a fair bit of meat that I need to take off this nut. I don't think there's going to be much thread left there, to be honest. So, I didn't take the nut down. I thought, you know what, I'm probably at the stage where I need to email my engineer, send him a bunch of photos. He's gotten back to me, and there's still some modifications that we need to do to this. I need to try and find some studs that I can press in from the back. So I think I'm gonna go do that now. I think there's gonna be a little bit of a modification to the thickness of the plate. I'm gonna go off, gonna do some researching and looking and part finding, and then I'll come back hopefully to modify this for the last time. We're nearly there. We're real close. So we've started with the shapes template. Pizza shapes, of course. Metal template. First 3D print, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, redesign on the first, next, and now we are here. So we have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 reiterations before we've gotten to the point where I think we're maybe 1 or 2 iterations away. Now, the only variable is yes, Jack, you may do your puncture repair. So the variable that we have is currently the stud is sitting in 8mm of meat, and you can see that there is a recess for the other stud. I don't know if that's going to be enough meat. The engineer's been getting back to me really quick. Sot from MVE, you're a champion. Thank you so much for getting back to me so consistently. So I'm going to press both studs in bolt it all up, see how it looks, send a video to SOT, and then go from there. Both studs are pressed in. I'm going to go to the belt sander and just sand this down. I've got a little chamfer that might be hard to see here, and then the recess going down. I'll match those profiles on the stud, and then we'll make sure that this bolts up to the caliper. We're real close, but there is still more modifications that need to be done to it. The general shape is probably right. That is now got all the clearance it needs. Take photos of all of this, send it to my engineer, confirm that he's happy with it all. All right, I emailed SOT like 3 minutes ago. I thought, well, I'll go eat some food, had a bigger stringer, feeling good. And he's already replied, we're good. This one is a winner, so I can take this and the STL file down to solid. We can start the process of getting this made into steel, and when I come back, we can go on with working out how we can make the dust shield work using the M140i outer and the E36 compact inner. Sick. Nice. Before we do that, I am going to test fit it to make sure it works. I'll hold that nice back for 1 second. I don't think that's in center correctly. There is a little bit of movement. Oh no! Well, I've got some not great news. So apparently when I did my original template, there was probably a little bit of flex in it. I was trying to make sure that this seam, because the caliper is made out of 2 halves, this seam should be in the middle of the rotor, which you can kind of see it isn't, which also means, I'll try and get a light in here, there's a little blue step down, which basically shouldn't be touching the rotor, and it is touching the rotor, and this rotor still even has some of a lip on there, so a fresh rotor, it would be touching it even more than what it is right now. So it means I've gotten this dimension wrong. This is 15.5, probably going to mean a redesign. So instead of having the bracket under the trailing arm, we have it over the trailing arm, so on this side, and then we have a long spacer. This bracket isn't going to work. This is just getting shaved down too thin, and there's not enough meat in there to retain enough strength to hold the caliper on while it's braking. A couple of days ago when I was talking to the engineer, he said that I can do it so the plate is on this side, and then these standoffs go down to meet the caliper. I've had a chat with Eden, we've discussed it back and forth. I finally came to the conclusion that we don't need to completely redesign this bracket. We need to cut out a section from this standoff, which then gives us clearance around the trailing arm. So then we can put bolts through the back and bolt this bracket on. It should still be tight on the back of here where the caliper's sitting, but we won't need to take anywhere near as much off, and like that's just too weak for a braking system. If we take that back off, this can bolt on, and then we just need to make it so we get this the right height. I've taken a bunch of measurements, and I believe it's 35.5 mil longer, and then this should bolt to here, and then the caliper should be able to bolt onto there with clearance. I think we finally have it. Well, we're really close. The redesign. So, this means I can now bolt this plate to the other side of the trailing arm, and we don't have any clearance issues, and we don't have to thin the bracket out at all. Let's bolt this on, see what it looks like, check out the clearance, and then if there's anything we need to modify, we can then modify it, but I think this is pretty much it. Sick. I've had a little bit of a play around with this already. I know that the bracket needs to be bolted to the trailing arm first. We're going to slide our 35 mil bolts in from behind. We want to put that on. Washer, washer, just because it's the plastic. We want to spread the load a little nicer. Watch off. Yes. And we have a huge amount of clearance on the back of the caliper. And how does the clearance on the caliper look? Look, there's a little bit of modification, but that's really only taking the height off of the bracket to then get the caliper in the right plane as far as the rotor is concerned. Nice. Okay, so the only thing that might change is the height. The position of the caliper won't change from here, so now we can take it all apart, cut the dust cover back to where we need it, and then get the M140i dust cover, cut the center out, and then just get this in the right spot. Now I'm just going to get some tin snips and cut around this outside diameter. We want to keep this little bit because we are going to try and transfer that onto the M140i dust shield. This is aluminium. Well, hopefully I've left enough on there for it to glue together. Man, this changes what I'm doing completely. No! Welcome back to Office, Lewis. In the previous episode, I was giving away a Black Knight Creations flag with the crab car. Before we do the giveaway, I just want to thank everyone who put an order in on the merch store. You should have received it by now. Half of them were international, so let me know if you haven't in the comments or shoot me a message over the merch store and we'll see if we can track down the tracking number and go from there. But again, thank you very much to everyone who ordered one. I'm going to call out Paul Sims on this one. Thank you for being the first one. I had the store up for like 20 minutes and he put an order in straight away. Thanks, mate. So, back to the giveaway. Mr. Rockin' Rain, if you can contact me over Instagram, Facebook, I'm going to leave my Discord server in the description. So if you want to jump in there or contact me any other way, we can work out how I can send the flag to you. We're going to jump back to Workshop Lewis and finish up the video. Thanks. I think that does it for here. Sadly, I can't give you the climax that you wanted on this particular occasion. I'm sorry. But I'm going to have to modify and mess around with the dust cover, and I want to get this video out basically today. From here, I'm going to take all of the footage that I've collected over the last week. Office Lewis is going to take over, and then you'll be able to watch this later on today, tomorrow morning. Depends on how it works for you. We've got the concept. We know exactly what's going to happen, how it's all going to fit. It fits really nicely and neatly, and it's just done. So I can now take this to Solid Engineering. They'll take the file that Eden's drawn up, convert it into a step file. They'll be able to then put it into G-code for the CNC mill, put chamfers, put fillets or radiuses in all of the hard corners. A hard corner is where it's going to crack, so if you can put a big radius in there, always put in a radius. In one of the next episodes, I will have 2 of these in metal. We will run through what fix I've come up with for the dust shields. I already know what I'm doing and it's going to work. I just can't get it done today. I want to thank all of my Patreons for the continued support. It does still mean a lot to me. Thank you very much. Once these are all ready, the design phase is finished, I can start fabrication. I will be selling these. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you might want to do to your car in the future. This will work on E30s and E36 compacts and maybe Z3s, but maybe not the Z3 6 cylinders. I don't know. We'll work that out later. If you're new to the channel, I do have a merch store. I do have a Patreon. We do have some pretty sick merch. If you're watching this just for the brakes, going into a pretty cool car. I mean, I think so anyway. If you want to keep up with the build, check out some of the previous episodes. It's an E30 M3 pickup, truck, ute, whatever you want to call it. Nice.